Ash still fell over the broken rooftops. The wind, which once carried wheat and songs, now brought only the bitter scent of smoke and loss. The war gave no warning. It came like thunder from a clear sky, shattering the routines of farmers, tearing down stone bridges, taking the strongest sons and leaving behind only silence, sorrow, and graves. There were no more schools, no more laughter in the fields, no more bread to go around. The small village of Vallelum, nestled between hills and forgotten paths, was home to just over 100 souls, men and women who knew the earth by its scent, its feel, and their faith. Children who once ran barefoot through streams now clung to their mother's arms, learning far too early how to tell the difference between thunder and bombs. Lazarus, the oldest among them, his hands marked by work and his gaze like a prophet's, kept a candle burning every night in the last chapel still standing. He didn't pray for revenge, he prayed for direction. God will deliver us. Not with swords, but with guidance, he whispered, even when hunger screamed louder than hope. With every new funeral, faith trembled. But whenever the breeze touched the open Bible on the stone altar, the people remembered. There was a promise, deeper than pain, a promise of beginning again. It was during the last winter, the cruelest of them all, that a dream began to take shape. On frozen nights, one by one, they dreamed of trains and oceans, of green lands where the wheat was golden and children played without fear. The dreams were similar, as if God had spoken to them all at once. At the final village gathering, Lazarus stood up. His voice trembled, but held. Strong, the war didn't kill us. Fear didn't silence us. But we can no longer plant roots in a bleeding land. We must leave. A train will pass through Nortenha in 3 moons, and after that, a ship will carry us beyond the sea. To the land the Lord will show us. Some wept, some doubted, but all knew deep down this wasn't an escape. It was a calling. And there, between cracked walls, flickering candles, and broken hearts, the caravan of hope was born. 100 people, 100 stories, 100 farewells, and one purpose: to follow the voice even in silence and walk by faith. The suitcases weren't made of leather. They were stitched from flour sacks tied shut with strips of old curtains. Inside there was no luxury, only what mattered most: a change of clothes, a faded photograph, the family Bible, and a handful of ye. Dried seeds. When Lazarus spoke of leaving, the village was torn on the inside, but stood united on the outside. Some of the elders whispered, "How can we cross the world with aching bones and hearts full of longing?" But the children, they smiled. For the first time in so long, they whispered about trains, ships, and, so even imagine that, beaches where fish jumped out of the sea. Faith was the ticket and courage the baggage. In silence, the village prepared. Tasks were shared. Sarah, once the town's seamstress, now led the gathering of supplies. João and Benicio, twin brothers in their early 20s, repaired the old ox cart to carry the sick to the station. Grandma, Raquel, with teary eyes and weathered hands, began teaching the children to sing hymns along the road, so fear wouldn't find a place in their hearts. Each night before sleep, they gathered around the ruined chapel. A fire crackled softly. Lazarus would read the Psalms aloud, his voice firm as if he could already see the promised land. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even those who had buried children began to lift their eyes again. Because this wasn't just a journey, it was an exodus, like leaving Egypt and walking toward Canaan. 3 days before departure, a mailman arrived, the first they'd seen in months. He brought only one letter. It was a notice. The train would pass through Nortenha only once that month, in 2 days. At dawn, there was no time for doubt. By sunrise the next day, the village buzzed like a beehive. Homes were closed but not locked. Windows were left slightly open, as if to say, "We'll return," or someone else might need shelter. Each person carried something heavier than their bags, the memories of what they left behind, those who buried sons, those who planted trees, those who married beneath that sky. But the distant hum of tracks sounded like the breath of God. That night they walked in silence along the dirt road to Nortenha. Lazarus led the way, a wooden staff in hand, and his eyes fixed on the stars. The children stayed in the middle, surrounded by arms, mantles, and protection, and behind them mothers sang softly, so that fear wouldn't hear their steps. By the time they reached the station, it was deep into the night. The train had not yet come, and under the cold, star-scattered sky, Lazarus whispered, "We are not the first to wait for a promise, but we will be the first from this land to believe until the end." And in that moment, as if heaven itself had given the signal, the train's whistle sliced through the silence. Eyes filled with tears, not because of the end, but because of the beginning. The journey had begun. The train was a tired old giant. Its windows were fogged, its seats stiff and worn. But for these people it was more than steel and smoke. It was the chariot of a promise. One by one they stepped into the train cars. The men helped the elders find their seats. The children huddled next to their mothers, wide-eyed, watching the world rush past the windows for the very first time. The conductor, a quiet man in a weathered hat named Augusto, didn't ask any questions. He simply looked into Lazarus's eyes and said, "You have a destination. I just take you to the end of the line." The engine groaned, let out its first breath, and began cutting through the plains, as if it were slicing the past in two. Outside, burned fields, ghost towns, ruins where joy once danced, clothes still, hanging on abandoned lines as if someone might return for them. Inside, silence, but not the silence of fear, a silence of reverence, as if everyone understood they were crossing an invisible line between what was and what could be. Sarah, who had brought an old notebook, began writing down the names of everyone on board, as if to say, "We existed, we left, we believed." David, an 8-year-old boy, was mesmerized by the trees flying past the window. Dew trees in the new land. "Grow bread?" he asked his mother. She smiled. She didn't know the answer, but she whispered, "If they don't, we'll plant them. God sends rain, even in the desert." The journey took 3 days. Along the way they shared dry bread as if it were a feast. They told each other stories, trying to stitch the memory of where they came from to the dream of where they were going. Sometimes the train stopped at small stations, but they never got off. They knew that wasn't the destination. On the early morning of the 4th day, when the first signs of the sea appeared on the horizon, the children cried out in delight, Look, the sky fell down to the earth, but it wasn't the sky. It was the ocean, and in the midst of fog and rising sunlight they saw it, a ship, an old freighter, rusted and worn, its name nearly faded, Morning Star. The port was humble, a few workers, and a chorus of seagulls, and when the people stepped off the train, Lazarus dropped to his knees at the edge of the dock. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. The conductor waved. He asked for no money. He wanted no thanks. He simply said, "I've never seen eyes so full of hope." Then he left, as if he too had been part of the miracle. The people stepped toward the ship with hesitant steps. Most had never seen the sea, never smelled salt in the air, or felt what freedom might taste like. Some wept as they touched the water. Others closed their eyes and prayed, grateful just to be alive. The ship's captain was a foreigner. He didn't speak much, but his eyes were kind. He knew. He was carrying more than passengers. He was carrying promises. Once everyone was aboard, a warm breeze swept in from the east. The sails were raised. The horn sounded, and the people of Vallelum set sail into the unknown. At the back of the ship, Lazarus stood tall, watching the land grow smaller. Farewell, land that wounded us, and thank you for teaching us to believe. And so 100 souls scut through the sea like a living prayer. The crossing had begun. The first days were filled with silence and wonder. The sea, with its overwhelming vastness, seemed to test the hearts that came from a wounded land. Each wave was a memory, each sway of the ship a whisper of what had been left behind. The voyage, like in the old days, was long. Morning Star moved slowly, guided by wind and faith. No roaring engines, just the creak of wood, the snap of sails, and steady eyes on the horizon. In the first week, the night still brought flickers of their homeland, tiny golden dots like sad fireflies glimmering on the shore they were slowly leaving behind. "It's as if the land itself doesn't want to let us go," whispered Donna Raquel one evening. The children stood along the ship's edges, hoping to catch a glimpse of a familiar mountain between the clouds. But as time passed, the lights faded night after night, until they vanished completely. In the second week there was only sea and stars, nothing more, no land, no sails beyond their own. Just the deep blue, wavering between beauty and loneliness. "The Lord made the depths also," said Lazarus, the Bible, resting on his knee as the wind played with its pages. There their faith was tested, not by doubt but by silence. Benicio, who had never cried before, confessed to Sarah on a cold, sleepless night, "If God is with us, why is the sea so big?" Sarah, stitching together a blanket from scraps of the old village, answered softly, "Because the promise is big too." That week, the food grew scarce. The bread was broken into pieces so thin they felt like blessings counted by hand. Some fell ill. A strange fever swept through 5 children, but no one died, because the mothers sang. And Lazarus never stopped looking to the sky. It was as if God himself was among them, between the waves and the constellations, holding the ship's hull with invisible hands. In the third week, everything changed. The nights began to glow with a new kind of light, different, golden, faint at first, like the beginning of a sunrise. The children were the first to notice. "There are stars under the water," cried David, but they weren't stars. They were lights. Lights from the new land, a place with no name on any map, a faraway country with a strange climate, a foreign tongue, and uncertain promises. But for this people, it was sacred ground. The land of their dreams burned into their hearts during so many cold nights, a place God had planted in them. Even before they were born, on their final night aboard the ship, everyone gathered on the upper deck. There were no speeches, no long prayers, only a song, an ancient melody about peace, about seeds sown in the desert and waters springing from the tomb. Impossible. Lazarus looked toward the lights, his eyes filled with tears. That's where it all begins, a new time, a new story. And as if the sky itself agreed, a shooting star brushed across the heavens. The people smiled, not because of what they saw, but because of what they believed. The sea no longer frightened them. It had become just a bridge. By morning, the ship would anchor. But that night they all slept, not rocked by the waves, but cradled by the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The sun rose slowly that day. A gentle golden light passed through the clouds, as if the whole sky was smiling. The ship, Morning Star, anchored with a soft groan, like an old messenger finally completing its mission. From the deck, the 100 travelers gazed upon the new land. It was different, green in unexpected places with tall trees, damp soil, and flowers that carried a scent no one recognized. And there, in that foreign port, where no one waited for them, they stepped ashore. No red carpet, no crowd, but their feet touched the ground, like someone touches a miracle. Lazarus was the first to kneel. He kissed the earth. He cried in silence. Behind him, the children ran, fearless. Some picked leaves, others laid down on the damp grass, looking at the sky as if saying, "Now we can grow." The language was strange, the marketplace confusing, the houses unfamiliar, but no one felt lost. They were beginning. They pitched tents with makeshift cloth, started fires with gathered twigs, broke the last pieces of bread, not like those who have little, but like those who believe tomorrow will bring more, and tomorrow did come. Some locals came to see the strangers from the sea, and in them they saw something different. Not just the worn clothes or sunburnt faces, they saw a light in their eyes that doesn't burn out easily. Sarah opened a small tent and began to sew. Within days, women from the city came to learn from her. Benicio and João repaired a broken well and were invited to work with the local fishermen. David, the boy of many questions, made friends with a local child. And together they discovered that play needs no translation. And every night, beneath a wide leafy tree they gathered. They sang, they prayed, they remembered, but above all, they dreamed. They dreamed of schools, gardens, and solid homes, of a new name for their makeshift village. Lazarus, now slower in step, still had a strong voice. And one night, looking up at the stars, he said, "We shall call this place New Light, because we walked out of the shadows, and here God lit the flame of hope once more." The community grew. With time, they were no longer seen as strangers, but as neighbors. They helped build, teach, plant, and love. And those once wounded by war became healers of others. Many years later, one of the children from that voyage, now Groan wrote in the same journal that Sarah had begun on the ship, "We were only 100, but we carried with us what many had lost. Faith, and where there is faith, there is a way, and where there is a way, God walks with us." And so this story ends, of a people who did not flee, but answered a call, who crossed the sea by faith and who took root not only in a new land, but in one another's hearts. Because where there is light, whether new or old, there is always a new beginning.